please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome everyone who's here and those who are watching live stream. We're on 2.2, welcome and introductions, and we'll start with Dr. Cardona.
Tammy Cardona, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary.
Randy Gilman, Assistant Superintendent Elementary.
Kelly Brock, Assistant Superintendent Human Resources.
April Meckel, Board Member.
Jim Shalou, Director.
Judy Turney, Board Secretary.
John Stewart, Chief Financial Officer.
Carol Yount, Board Member.
Crystal Hargis, Vice President.
Michelle Chamberlain, Board Member.
Nisha Patel, Superintendent.
Judy Smith, Board President. 2.3, approval of agenda for June 1st. I need a motion.
So move. So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed? 2.4, approval of meeting minutes from May 18th, 2021 and May 21st, 2021. We need a motion to approve those.
Motion, Chamberlain.
Second, Hargis.
All in favor?
Yes.
Any
Abstain.
opposed? Okay. 3.1, superintendent's comments. Dr. Patel.
Yes, we just, I'll be brief because we have an update in a little bit, but we had a great last week of school, and I know that it was nice to see all the kids get on the bus and be ready to go home, and they were cheering and so excited to have summer break. And I think our teachers are probably on the same boat, especially after the year we've had. But here's something that I think I wanted to make sure I mentioned in the update, to talk about dedication of our teachers. So once summer starts, we obviously give a lot of professional development opportunities. So pre-COVID, we averaged about 65 different learning opportunities that we would give to teachers to sign up for. Right now, for this summer, again, this is after a pandemic, we have the same number of offerings that we're giving. Pre-COVID, we would have about 520 registrations for teachers wanting to take part in this professional development. This summer, we have over 900. That's dedication, that's wanting to be better in the classroom, that's professional development at its finest. So I mean, that was unbelievable. I don't think any of us expected that. So I just wanted to give a shout out to our teachers. And of course, summer school starts Thursday. And then we have some really good news that Dr. Cardona will be sharing in a little bit with us. So I will not share that.
Okay, well then, we have board member and cabinet reports. So Dr. Cardona, would you like to go ahead and share?
I will be happy to. So first of all, I would like to thank all the board members for coming to graduation this last week. It doesn't matter how many of those I attend, they always bring a little bit of joy to my heart, right, and a little tear to my eye to see those kids go across the stage. Just so you know, we had 775 graduates between both high schools, and we had a total of $19 million worth of scholarships awarded. So that's pretty incredible between both high schools. So I want to thank all of the administrators at the high schools and all the love and energy that they put into those kiddos, and I think it was a great celebration. So those of you that know Maria know that she has been over our college and career readiness programs. One of the things when she started in that was really a vision for being able to have PLTW, which is Project Lead the Way for the district. And so every year she would apply for grants, because there's all different kinds of grants out there. And every year she'd be turned down. She's like, my vision and my dream is to have PLTW in this district, K-12. So both high schools do have the program, and it has continued to grow in that we've gotten money through grants that she's applied for. So I was on a call with her, a Zoom meeting actually with our representative with PLTW, Ashley Benning, and she said, I just want to let you guys know you have received a grant for next year, which actually is going to be for a total of $390,000 This is going to be $20,000 per elementary school and $20,000 for early childhood education. For the early childhood center, and then we have $30,000 per middle school, and we had already started working at this next year. Will be our first year to actually have it at the middle school, and then that gives us $15,000 per high school. So we were sitting there, and it was like we were part of an Oprah show or something. We're like, wait, what? Now we do have to fill out the grants. Those are due by June 30th, but she said that it's been awarded to you. It is. She wouldn't tell us who the donor is. It's every year, it's kind of a different big corporation that does that. And so one of the stipulations this year was that you had to be within a certain radius of Peevely. And so we were one of the districts that got that. So what that means for our district and our kiddos to be able to offer Project Lead the Way. I know at the elementary level they have a program called Launch. So we'll fill out the grant. Obviously, how it usually works is the first year is ordering equipment and seeing what that's going to look like. And of course, there's some planning that's going to have to take place at the elementary. And then you have a year to implement those things. And then your third year of the grant is really giving feedback to what you did with the money and how the program was developed within your building. So exciting for sure. And honestly, I can't even put a value on the amount of grants that we've probably received because of her putting that in. So a huge shout out to Maria. And I think that's a huge testament to somebody who persistence, right? You can tell me no once, and you can tell me no 2 times, 3 times, 5 times, but on that 6th time, we got this money for our kids. And it's awesome and great for our kids.
Tammy, now Project Lead the Way is about mostly STEM kinds of things. Tell us a little bit about that.
It is. So at the high school,
Sorry
we have
about
multiple.
STEM, we're talking about science, technology.
Science,
engineering.
technology, correct. At the high school, we just continue to grow those programs. One of the things, cybersecurity is one big thing that we're implementing. Actually, it's going to be new at Fox High School this next year. So biomed, there's a lot of things that we've tried to bring that we couldn't. So the grant will actually cover training for the teachers because there is very specific training that you have to have. And then there's specific equipment, and they're very strategic about what type. Obviously, a lot of it is technology based. Those grants will cover that too. So anything to do with computer science, anything to do with, they do a lot of technological with building through the computers and coding and things like that. So the middle schools were actually starting that this year, so it just gives us money to help build that program so that we're continuing to feed the high school programs.
So are these extra classes that you're able to offer as electives?
Yes, so at the high school they are electives, and they're kind of in stages of how you take them. Now at the middle school, again, this is going to be brand new for the middle school, so they were offering it as an elective. One thing that she did tell us is we get on the website. PLTW has a specific website. You go in and you pick all of the equipment that you want. And she said if it comes back, let's say for a middle school, and all the equipment that you need comes up to $33,000. She said, reach back out to me and say, look, $30,000 if we could. And she said, I can probably make that happen for you. So she said, you go for what you need. It is not a matching grant. That was one of the first things Dr. Patel brought up, because a lot of times we do as districts get grants, right? And it's a matching grant. This is totally funded. It's considered a 3-year grant, but it's not that amount of money every year. It's that amount of money, but you have 3 years to put the process in place.
What does it look like at the elementary level?
Yeah, that's nice.
So honestly, I don't know that much about it at the elementary. I know it's called Launch. When she was talking to us, and I don't know if you're going to go into this or not, Rainey, so I don't want to steal your thunder.
No, go ahead.
But since I'm first, I'm
You're
going to go
first.
ahead and
Do it.
I'm going to go ahead and take it anyway. But one of the things that's awesome is she said a lot of the school districts that use it, they do it instead of science. It is their full science curriculum because it is totally aligned to the Missouri Learning Standards, and it becomes their curriculum. And she said it is, so some buildings, depending on the setup, and I think this is really going to be the input of how the buildings see this, but in some buildings, they'll have a teacher that maybe does all of the launch program and the kids rotate through. Sometimes every teacher's trained on it, and that's just their science class. So I think it really just depends on how our elementary teachers see that fitting into their schedule.
Is it K-5 or is it like 5th grade?
No, it's
Yeah, it's all the way down to kindergarten.
all the way
Actually,
down to
yeah.
early childhood.
Yeah, actually pre-kindergarten.
Yep.
So the standards now target those next generation science.
Next
It
gen
does.
standards, yes.
That's great. Are you finished?
I'm
You're
finished.
done?
I'm
That's
finished.
awesome. That's wonderful.
So thank you, Maria, and thank you for
Yes.
the grant. It's awesome for our kids.
All right, Dr. Gilman, did she leave you anything?
No, she pretty much took all of it, but yeah, it's definitely aligned to next gen, and it goes all the way down to pre-kindergarten. So really excited about that. I just have just a couple things. Speaking of the professional development that Dr. Patel mentioned, after a totally exhausting year, we have bus drivers and cooks and teachers and TAs that are signing up and willing to do our summer school program this year, which is a big deal. Gonna have a lot of fun with kids, and obviously make sure that those gaps are filled in to the best of possibility. So that starts this week on Thursday, and we're just looking forward to that. Pre-K through 8, we got about 2,500 students approximately. So looking forward to that, and that's all I have, since Tammy took everything else.
I have no report.
Well, I just wanted to say it's summer and it's exciting, and I was honored to be a part of graduation. And I didn't know I'd be so emotional about it, but it was a very cool experience. I was honored to see all those kids walk across. I'm not quite ready for summer and what's about to go down at my house, the free-for-all, but we're going to make it work. I'm also excited for summer school to start, and it's just, I see great things ahead for Fox, especially with hearing about the grant, and we're very lucky to have such talented people in the district.
Coming out of COVID, there's somewhat of a renaissance, I think, taking place now. I think this year of going through that has made us all appreciate the things that maybe that we always didn't take advantage of nearly as much as we should, and I feel like that we're going to experience a little bit of a renaissance of moving forward, having success, and I just feel like there's a lot of hope out there right now, and I think that's good for our kids. I know my little grandson, he's a first grader, but he left school anxious for next year. And I think that's a good thing for our kids, and I think we really need to seize the moment and absolutely make the best of it for our kids, because I think we're all ready to move on to bigger and better things.
I just have one quick announcement. We'll dive in deeper to it in our budget discussion later, but the allocations for ESSER 3 came out last week for school districts, and so the Fox School District is going to receive a little over $8.9 million in ESSER 3 funds. So that's good news for us, but we'll talk about that a little bit later.
I just say thank you, Maria. What a great thing for us.
Yes, thank you, Maria, for all your hard work. We know writing grants can be really difficult, and when you get turned down, it's even harder, but she pulled it through for us, and we really appreciate it. I was able to participate in graduation, and it is emotional. Some of those kids I had in kindergarten through 6th grade in the REACH program, and to watch them walk across the stage, it just makes me so proud of them. And all of the students and what they have accomplished, and to see all of the scholarships that were awarded, wow, that is awesome. So, and that's it.
I actually had a child graduate from Fox, and that was just absolutely amazing to see David walk across that stage and me be able to give him that diploma. And then I think it was really special to me, but I really think my son just thoroughly enjoyed it very much. So, and with the Project Lead the Way, my daughter has been in it, and Mr. Mertens, I think, is one of the teachers, and Mr. Siggety, and absolutely amazing teachers. And I'm sorry I don't know Seckman people, but wow, that's amazing, and I can't wait to see what the future holds. And that's why we just got to continue progress forward and seeing what else we can put in place for our kids, because they deserve it. And summer school's going to be starting this week, and the high school is going to be starting with in-person and virtual classes. And parents, if your kids didn't pass a class, maybe it's really important that they attend the in-person class, probably not do a virtual class. They may not do too well with that, but I'm so excited, and I can't wait to hear how everything else goes tonight.
I do want to say thank you to Maria for her persistence and continue on and see that success come. That's wonderful, and it's a great benefit to our students. And graduation was a wonderful thing. It's always great to see those kids, the successes they have, and all of the scholarships, those who entered the armed forces. I was amazed at the number of students who have volunteered to go serve our country, and that was really exciting too. And we will move on to 4.1, Superintendent Update. Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any patron comments?
No.
Oh, okay. No patron comments. On to 4.1, Dr. Patel.
Yeah, so superintendent update, I just wanted to talk about when you reflect back on this year, right? We've had a challenging year. We've used the word grit, we've used the word challenging, we've used grace, patience, all of that. But I think we need to also think about, in the year that we've had, our kids have been in school from the very beginning in some form or fashion. Only 1 or 3 buildings did we have to shut down the entire year. That's pretty remarkable. And I truly believe that's because of our staffs who were diligent with the mitigating factors. We were social distancing as much as possible. We were washing our hands. We were disinfecting and cleaning as much as possible. And we kept our masks on. And the board voted in August to make sure we all have our masks on, and we did. I truly believe all those mitigating factors helped us stay in school. Even during the toughest months when we were bright red with a positivity rate of over 40%, we were able to keep our schools open. And so I wanted to make sure that we give kudos to everybody who agreed to do that, and diligently we kept athletics going, which was a challenge so many times, but the mitigating factors worked. Right now, if you look at our data dashboard, we have I can't believe this, that we have only 1 positive student and 1 positive staff member. And I think maybe 11 students quarantined and 1 staff member quarantined. From where we were to where we are now, it's remarkable. And I think as we look forward to the summer, we need to discuss one item for sure, and we've been talking about it, we've been getting some communication. Jefferson County school districts, most of them are going to go mask optional in the summer for summer school. I know that that's a conversation that we want to have here tonight and say, okay, what are our thoughts and where do we want to go from here? And so I'm going to open it up to the floor and just let's have a conversation about it, what we want to do with masks.
Mrs. Smith? I think all of us are ready to get rid of these things, but we followed Dr. Patel's procedure and her direction for the entire school year. And her information that she's giving to us is based on Jefferson County, CDC, our own school nurses, and Dr. Patel has continued to tell us these masks are important for our kids to continue to wear. So as much as I would like to say let's throw them away, I really hope that we can continue to use them during our summer program at least that long.
And that is a point, Ms. Young, that we did talk about. The whole year we followed CDC and we followed Jefferson County Health Department's recommendations. We didn't veer from it. And I know right now that even I personally, Nisha, would be, okay, I'm fully vaccinated, I'm immunized. Yes, I can do without the mask. But when I look at it from a district perspective as a superintendent, it's hard for me knowing that we had our students register for summer school knowing that we were going to keep the mask mandate. We had our staff fill and apply for the positions knowing that we're going to keep our mask mandate. So this would be another curveball that we're throwing. Another thing to consider is in the summer we do have a lot more outdoor classrooms. So the kids will be outdoors more without masks. So they'll get more frequent mask breaks as well. So that's just some things to consider as well. I did speak to our director of nursing. about this change. You know, I said, hey, what are your thoughts as the director of nursing, Kim Schumacher, if we do decide to not have masks and make it optional for our kids? And she did have hesitancy in the fact that she said, if you do that, you just have to be ready that there will be more quarantines. Because if either one of you have to be both parties have to be masked to avoid quarantines. So if you make it mask optional, one person may have it on, one may not, so we would have to quarantine them, unless they were fully immunized. And right now we don't have that big of a population of our older kids who have gotten vaccinations yet. Staff, yes.
I guess
So just things to consider, sorry.
I guess I kind of want to go with the other districts that are going mask optional. I think parents have been waiting for that. I think kids have been waiting for that. I would like to lean that way and have some type of guideline that says if we get a certain percentage of cases, or that we could always go back to mask if it gets to a point where it's not containable, or with only having one case, I just feel like it's time to try it out. It's optional coming to summer school. It was optional for teachers to sign up for summer school. I would like to go mask optional for summer school. And I think that we just have to realize that people may end up being quarantined. If they're fully vaccinated, they don't have to quarantine. But I would like us to go that way.
Relative to the staff, if they're immunized, of course, there would be no real good reason for them to wear a mask. On the other hand, do we have staff members that haven't been immunized that are wanting to teach?
I don't have that data, but I would predict yes. I'm sure we have some staff members that are not been vaccinated that are going to be teaching.
It seems like those folks would have a moral obligation to probably wear a mask, I would think. You can recommend that, maybe not require it, but recommend it. But I know this, if my kid were there who has not been immunized, I would feel pretty uncomfortable if there was an adult in that room that had not been immunized that was teaching, because it's still contagious, it's still dangerous. As a matter of fact, I just heard of a situation where a whole family got it, and somebody got very, very ill and was at death's door. And so, I mean, it's still an issue, not near the issue that it was, but I would think that for the people that are working for us, they need to, I would hate for a kid to get sick and it was because we had a staff member that wasn't immunized and wasn't wearing a mask. And so that would be the piece that I would worry about, because teachers are working very closely with these people, and if they haven't been immunized and they get sick, they're doing it. I know that complicates the issue a little bit.
Have we had any cases of adults giving it to children?
I'm trying to think back to contact tracing that we've done. We have not been able to identify that, no.
But we've been wearing masks.
Correct.
Right.
I think of the contact tracing, how much of a nightmare that's going to be if we go mask optional. However, I'd feel like a hypocrite if I didn't support this, because the district that I work in and I get to go to summer school, we are mask optional. So I just know that being 3 feet apart, we're going with, if somebody comes up positive and you're within the 3 feet, you are mandatory quarantine. So as a parent, then you think of, I send my kid to school with a mask, and my kid had a mask on, but you're still quarantining my kid. Some parents aren't going to understand that or like that, but maybe communication. And I worry that the nurses haven't had a lot of time to really process this maybe. So if we do this, start it next Monday or something, if we could do that and make sure bus drivers and everyone is on the same page.
Judy, on the bus drivers,
Bus drivers, it's a federal mandate. Bus drivers must wear a mask, and students on the bus must wear a mask. It's a federal mandate. No matter what the district does, they have to do that. And as far as quarantining and contact tracing goes, nurses would only be required to do that during school hours. And if it is, I mean, I'm hoping there's not going to be any contact tracing, or very little, especially at the elementary level where we have the most students in person. But I think that another faculty member could be also assigned, like they were during the school year, to help, and that I know that the nurses have charting to do, medicines to give out, and other things they need to do, and they need to make sure they're doing those things also, and that if the assistant principal or the principal or the secretary, if somebody in the buildings could be assigned to helping them with contact tracing, I think that would be the way to go, because we don't want anybody working after hours to do this. And I mean, I'm just thinking positively that you're going to have very little of that. And I know in some of the school districts, they've even set a percentage that if a certain percentage of the students attending and staff attending become quarantined, then they go back to mask mandated. And so.
Dr. Patel, what happens if we do not mandate masks and a teacher gets sick? What happens to her classroom?
So if the teacher ends up being positive, COVID-19 positive, then the classroom would be quarantined.
So the entire class would be quarantined?
Yes, unless we can prove that certain students weren't within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, which is nearly impossible, especially at the elementary level.
And that's what bothers me, is that we're hopefully and probably not happen, but to take a chance on that happening with maybe 30 kids, and whether they get sick or not, they're quarantined out of school, and then there's another virtual thing that has to be brought about. I guess that's my biggest fear, is that not wearing them could create a worse situation. And I do understand that in summer school, there probably will be more mask breaks, so to speak, because the kids will be outside and doing different activities. So, but that's what I was wondered. If a teacher is sick, that could absolutely affect the entire classroom. And we do have trouble getting subs anyway, don't we? Thank you.
And I'm going to ask the flip side of that. If the teacher is in quarantine, what will the expectations be?
So that's something we need to discuss. Obviously, we have continued, if the teacher's quarantined, if we quarantine the teacher, we have paid for them to be quarantined. So the expectation would be we get a sub in the classroom, and even that, it's only going to be a temporary fix because we have to have a certified individual in the classroom. So the expectation for that teacher would be you're going to have to come up with lesson plans to help teach this class virtually, which is really a challenge for summer school courses. Kelly, do you want to talk a little bit about the subs? If we have teachers all of a sudden that we have to quarantine?
Yes, so what we've done during the school year is that if somebody is on quarantine and they are well and able to teach virtually, we've still had to have them a sub for the kids who are in person, but then they have remoted in to the classroom. If they are caring for somebody who's ill, or if they themselves are ill, of course that's not the expectation, and they have been compensated either way. And I would say that that would continue through summer school.
But if somebody just gets the flu, they're not compensated. But if they get COVID, they are.
Correct.
Well, I feel as though we've always been a little behind in on what we're deciding. To bring parents to the campus, to go to school 4 days a week. And I feel as though we've had a year to learn. Now you'll say, well, April, summer school starts in 2 days. You're late again. But what if we look at it as preparing for the fall and trying it out for then? That's what I keep going back to. That way we can troubleshoot. I'm not I'm not saying it's any less serious, and I don't want anyone sick, of course. I don't want anything bad to happen. But how will we ever know if we don't take this step with the smaller group of summer school, or as some kids call it, funner school? So that's what I keep going back to. There's no right or wrong decision. It's a tough spot to be in, and I don't make it lightly, but that's where I think it should be optional for summer school, just to help us to prepare more for the fall, for when everyone comes back. Especially, we have one case at the moment, and Judy, I liked your idea of if there's X amount of cases, then perhaps. And I think as teachers, you know, they're creative. There are ways to set up your classroom, mask versus, versus non-mask kids. You as a teacher can be 6 feet away. If you have to come together, they could put their mask on if they want to sit down with their story time or whatever. I think that there are ways around it if we're smart, but I think we need to try it now, as opposed to, okay, fall's here, 12,000 students, let's figure it out then. I just think it's too late then.
Well, if things keep going the direction they're going, I'm hopeful that fall, it won't even be a topic of discussion.
Right, so we need to be prepared.
Well, I guess the biggest concern I have is a teacher that hasn't been immunized and not wearing a mask. That would be the biggest concern I would have, because they, are in mixed groups, and again, outside, I don't see any particular good reason for that, but I worry about the school district being the generator of the problem is what I worry about. And so that's the only piece that
Well, the only thing with that philosophy is that hasn't happened at all year. The school was never the generator of
we've been wearing masks all year.
Right, but
you can't,
but people weren't, I know.
Maybe that was overkill, but the truth is, had we not done that, it may have been a very different kind of thing. And so you can't prove that.
Yes, the schools were wearing masks, but, they're not on the playgrounds, they're not outside, they're not wearing masks there. You go to any of these sporting events, they're not wearing them there. All these kids are playing together on the weekends at baseball. I'm in it, I see it all the time. I'm just saying maybe this is the next step to see how, how it would work one way or the other.
So I would just need a motion.
Crystal, what do you
I'm
get ready to
thinking,
say?
I don't know. I'm very much a proponent of the mask. Everybody knows that because of my circumstances. But I keep going back that summer school is optional. So I feel like I want the teachers to know that if there is a situation, I'm afraid that if we say that they're optional, then there might be some pushback from parents. If there's a situation in the classroom and the teacher feels like, I think that maybe we might be doing story time, and they might be a little bit closer than the 3 feet, which is, I don't know how they can even possibly measure all that, but that they would be, I want them to have the leeway to say, all right, guys, we're at this situation. I think that you need to put your mask on after we, if we choose to, in a few minutes, to move on to our safety positions, then they can take their mask off. So, I keep going back. This is optional. Summer school is optional. I understand that parents did sign up thinking there would, but I also wonder if they did, if they thought that this was a possibility, that they would not be required to wear masks.
And we know that, those that ride the bus will have a mask with them.
Right.
If they don't come on a bus, they need to bring one, or we just need to provide them.
Right.
In cases where the teacher says, we're going to do a project together, everybody put your mask on, we're going to do this, and then, but I do think that we do need to set some type of parameter for the contact tracing if in case it occurs, so that no one is swamped, and that it does take place. Other school districts aren't even talking about it. I do know it is required by the CDC, and we need to follow those guidelines. Other schools are looking at it case by case. We want to make sure we're following everything that we need to do. But I mean, you know, like April said, we've got sports going on, we've got kids playing ball, we've got kids playing soccer, we've got kids going swimming, we've got kids going to camp. And I just think that it's time we try this. And I mean, my grandkids are playing with all of the neighbors outside every single day. And I don't know, I just think we need to try this. And I think a lot of the parents are waiting for this. Some may be apprehensive, and some may say, I was planning on a mask, and those children are welcome to wear the mask. And I do realize that there may be a quarantine situation, and I do know that some parents may be counting on this kind of as childcare also. And if their child is quarantined, then that kind of throws them out. But the same thing's going to happen in the fall also. If some quarantine happens, they're going to be having to babysit, you know, take care of their kids again. And so I do think it is a good test. And so if somebody wants to make the motion, we can move forward and vote, and we'll just see how the vote comes.
I'll make a motion to make mask optional for summer school.
Judy, do you want to put in there anything about like a percentage?
I think Festus said
I
what?
think they're doing less than 2%.
Less than 2%.
Is yeah,
Okay.
So is that,
in a building,
okay,
at a summer school site
so how many kids would that be?
for staff and students. There's about 350 kids per site, approximately 350 to 400.
John, what's 2% of 3?
Seven children.
7 children.
Okay. And it is pretty much the, what we followed all year long in terms of closing down a building.
So then we would mask them at 2%.
You would mask them.
Okay,
Right.
yeah, okay. So you want to make that part of your motion that
I'm not
if
trying
the
to change your motion.
If the school goes over,
I was really brave in doing it, but do I have to say all of that?
You can just add a less than 2% in.
just add it, that if it goes over 2%,
Okay.
we will require mask.
So I make a motion that masks are optional for summer school unless it goes over 2%
At a site.
per site.
So then that building will just
Okay,
mask.
do you want that building, or do you want everybody to become mask mandated?
I would just do that building.
Just that building?
Just that building.
Okay. That sounds really good. I mean, that's, thank you, Randy. That's a good way to put it.
And this will start on the first day of school?
First day of school.
First day of school.
So is the motion to make masks optional for summer school unless it goes over 2%
At a building.
per site, then that building would be mask mandated? Is that what the motion is?
Yes, it is.
And we need a second.
So move.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
All opposed?
So everybody voted yes, Carol voted, except for Carol, she voted no.
Is this the time we're going to talk about contact tracing, or what are we going to do with it?
Yeah, so contact tracing, we will continue to do as we have been since January, which means we are only requiring the nurses to do contact tracing during summer school hours. Anything after that will have to be done by an assistant principal or principal, and we'll contact Jefferson County Health Department. Unfortunately, they've never been able to help us throughout the year, and I know they probably will not be helping us in the summer as well. So we're just gonna take it as it comes and do our best with contact tracing. So if it means we can't call parents or let people know till the next day, then that's what's gonna happen. And I think parents need to understand that as well. And then also, I just wanna be very clear that what this means is bus drivers and students, they still have to wear the masks on the bus because it's a federal mandate. And also understand that kids and staff will be quarantined if someone tests positive and someone did not have a mask on.
And in this case, it's 10 days.
And that's 10
And
days.
they can test out early, is that correct?
On day 7.
On day 7.
Yes, but it is 10 days.
Would that include immunized staff?
No, if they're immunized, then they do not need to quarantine. Correct.
And I'm sure you're going to communicate that with everyone, all of these things,
Yes,
of course.
yes.
thank
We've got a letter ready and we will be sending that out.
I also just want to, for secondary level, students that come to summer school are there for credit recovery and they're required to meet for so many hours to be able to receive that credit. So while if they have to be quarantined, we can work to get that virtual, and we do have several options virtually. It's, you know, we got to make sure that we have those things in place for those secondary schools, because for those secondary students, because they are coming to be able to receive that
Is
credit.
it easier for them to stay 6 feet away from each other, though, kind of?
And we really don't, most of our secondary students are virtual, so I think we have 250 that are going to be in person. So it is much, much easier for them. They're not outside as much as the elementary kiddos are, but it is easier for them. But just to keep that in our mind, that if we would have to quarantine somebody, you know, we got to make sure that we can have something in place for them, because that is going to be required for credit.
Are you prepared for that?
We have a lot of virtual that we can switch over, but it's going to be that teacher now that's doing both in-person and virtual if they have in-person kids.
Tammy, I have a question relative to the students that failed a course during the course of the regular year. If they retake that course, does that take the place of the failed course in their GPA?
If they have signed up for our continuous improvement, yes,
Okay.
it does.
So in
Whether
other
they
words,
have
it's like
failed.
that F never happened.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, they receive whatever grade they received this time. So let's say I'm a student that failed a course and I want to retake this for continuous improvement, and I get an F again, it's the F. If I have a B in that course and I'm trying for an A, and this time I receive a C, it will be a C. It's whatever their current grade is during that continuous improvement.
I thought I read that you can only take it if you have an F.
No, it's for anybody that wants to improve their grade for GPA.
Good idea.
Which excellent idea. I think that's. And another thing, these masks coming off. Well, I worked with staff today, and just seeing smiles on our faces. Oh my gosh, that's so, you know, whole body. It was like I haven't seen your smile in a whole year. It will do wonders for the staff and kids. So.
And then, so just to clarify, because I know we'll be getting staff emails and phone calls. Is this totally fine. We will problem solve like we always do. Just point of clarification I need. Is this for this is not just summer school, right? This is for our district mask optional, because we have professional development that occurs with staff get together. We have teachers and buildings that go into buildings. We're saying mask optional as a district, correct?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to be
I think
aware.
my motion said summer school.
Yes, it does. Well, let's change it, can we change it to district,
Or do you need another motion?
You've already voted on it.
So you'll need another motion.
So, can I make the motion then?
You ready?
Yeah, okay.
I make a motion that Fox C-6 School District goes mask optional, and in the school buildings, up until it gets to 2%, and then masks will be implemented. Okay, so. Okay, so just take out the masks. Professional development, curriculum, writing, sports, all that kind of stuff, mask optional.
Now, these are all,
Activities.
keeping in mind that what we're talking about, they're all optional activities. So nobody's being forced to do anything. That's a little bit of a difference between this and the regular school year. Because the regular school year, it's compulsory. The kids have to go. Teachers are under contract. They have to do it. Relative to Robbins, I think you mentioned she's going to have 900 professional development people. Was there any kind of a information sent out relative to those professional development that indicated either masks were required or not required?
No, because we were just under the assumption that it's still mask required. So I don't know if she specifically said, hey, you will be required to wear a mask during this professional development event, because some are virtual, some are in person, you know.
You know, I think I would take it one step further. Our university did it this way, and it kind of makes sense. It's, if you've been immunized, you don't need to wear a mask. If you've not been immunized, it's strongly recommended that you wear a mask. Not required, but strongly recommended.
And we would do that in our communication. We highly encourage you to continue to wear a mask if you're not immunized.
And just to address Michelle's motion, so this would apply across the board, like we have year-round employees, so offices, not just activities or optional activities. We have people who work in offices, we have custodians, technology, and any number of other people who work year-round.
Okay, so can I clarify this? So this motion says all Fox C-6 staff, masks are optional. For all C-6 staff, masks are optional in all school buildings and for all activities, including PD, unless it reaches a 2% positivity rate. Yeah, that part was off.
That's a community positivity rate now?
No.
That part was off of it. She just took that part off.
Yeah, I just,
So no 2%?
no, because that was already placed in April's motion. But like the whole district is mask optional. So not just staff, it's like if you come to an event, you have a choice of whether you're going to come into the event with the mask on or not.
Okay.
Professional development activities are only sometimes virtual and then sometimes only for an hour and a half, or, so there would be no way to know.
That's a choice.
Right, it's just a choice that they choose, so.
All right, so how do you want to word that?
Just that it's optional.
What you read is fine.
But it said only staff. And you're saying it's not just staff, it's anybody who walks on the district, on the campuses.
Yeah.
Yes? So how do you want to word that? So.
Because it could be people from other school districts that are taking some of this professional development.
Just all Fox C-6 school district. Right, just take the staff off. Okay. Okay.
Keeping in mind that if things blow up on us unexpectedly, we can always go back, change.
Right. Okay, so who's seconded?
Read it one more time for me, Judy,
Okay.
please.
So, okay. All Fox C-6 school district is mask optional in all school buildings and activities, including PD.
Just ended it all.
Yeah, I don't think
Just all activities. period.
Okay, so all Fox C-6 school district is mask optional in all school buildings and activities.
You don't have to say for summer. You don't have to get into.
Yeah, probably clarify that. Put summer on there because we don't know what fall's going to be. All Fox C-6 school district is mask optional in all school buildings and activities during the summer.
Until further notice.
Until further notice. Is that what it is? Until further notice?
Yes, that's good.
During the summer until further notice.
Okay, we need a second.
Okay.
I'll second it. I'll second it.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. And those opposed? No. Okay. Thank you. Dr. Patel, did you want to say anything else about that, to clarify anything?
No, I think we've pretty much cleared that up.
Let's hope.
As clear as we can be at this point.
One other thing I just want to mention. I mentioned this before, but Dr. Patel did a extraordinary, exemplary job managing this all year long. This has been just, I can't imagine a superintendent having to deal with this. And I really want to commend her for her management of it, because it was, for a new superintendent, pretty darn good, let me tell you. So congratulations on that.
I do want to encourage everyone, though, moving forward, that we just take care of ourselves and we don't worry about what other people are doing, the nasty words and the judgment and all of that. Just let's go forward and try to have a good attitude and support one another with what they choose to do and just move on with our lives.
Okay, 4.2 budget. Mr. Stewart.
So you have the packet in front of you, all the information. I think there's only one new item in here that you all hadn't seen before that I put together, and maybe it's just an adjusted version. So we'll talk through this a little bit, but nothing should be earth-shattering here.
Can I have one? I didn't get one.
I laid one at everybody's desk when Mr. Shalou was handing out stuff as well.
You gave me a lot of papers.
There we go. Okay. Everybody's got it.
Thank you.
All right. So again, most of these should look familiar. I'm not exactly sure how you want to do this, but my thought is I'm going to walk through these documents a little bit. I'll probably dive deeper into some than others, but I would like to get through all of them before we get into any heavy-duty discussion about, you know, what we're, how we're going to address the current deficit. So, so again, the first page is just budget assumptions that I used. I walked through those at the last meeting. I will tell you there's one that's been updated from DESE, so number 9, classroom trust fund, estimated to be $425 per ADA, is now $422. And while that's $3 less per ADA, that is classroom trust fund and the state aid payment all go together for one number. So just because this is going down $3, the other half of that allocation picks up that $3. So it's just, you know, whether it's going to be paid out through state aid or through the classroom trust fund. So it should still be fine as long as they don't change the state adequacy target of 63.75. That is all I'm going to tell you on page 1 there. Page 2 and 3 look really similar. The second page there has the budgeted revenues and expenditures by function, and the next page is the budgeted revenues and expenditures by object. So by function, the expenditure type are instructional, support services, community, capital improvement, and debt service. The one where it's by expenditures and object, those are salaries and wages, employment benefits, purchase services, supplies, capital improvement, and debt service. So you see that our projected revenue for the year is just under $133 million, and our projected expenditures is $135.4 million at this point. And I will refer back to, and I know I said it multiple times in our last meeting, this preliminary budget has every budget request that was submitted. So this is all in and worst case scenario in my estimation. Again, if we look down to the transfers item, so I'm estimating here a transfer to the capital projects of just under $3.6 million. We can adjust that number up or down. The current one, with an ending balance of $12.8 million in the operating funds, that is a 10.46% ending fund balance, using the projection that we're going to have about a $17.4 million fund balance at the end of this current fiscal year. So, it'll be a $4.6 million deficit in the operating funds. We could adjust that transfer to capital projects if we adjust it only to cover the deficit in capital projects and keep it at a net operating zero. That will improve the operating fund balances by about $1.45 million to 11.65%. Sir?
Question on capital improvement budget. What's the assumption on how much of our
This is still assuming that 62 cents would be in capital projects.
Okay. Is there any way that we can, since we can transfer money into capital projects up to
Approximately $5 million
$5 million,
based on the DESI calculations every year.
is there any, because I know over the last 4 or 5 years, that's gone from 32 cents in that levy up to 60, it's almost double. And of course, by taking it out of the operational fund, you're essentially, what you're saying is that we're gonna spend this money no matter what happens to the operating budget, we're gonna spend this much money in capital improvements. In other words, it really is taking a lot of the flexibility away, and that's why we run a $5.5 million reserve consistently over the last 5 years, because we committed money that we frankly didn't have the capital improvements in that fund, and some on top of it. And so what concerns me is that by doing that, and there's a lot of districts that apparently don't put much of anything in that capital improvements fund,
Correct.
because they can transfer that money in, it gives them the flexibility. Is there any particular reason why you want to take that flexibility away?
Well, there are a couple thoughts there. So at this point, we can transfer up to $5 million. If we had less than $5 million we were going to allocate to capital projects and expenditures in a year, absolutely. You don't need any tax levy in capital projects. However, we have roughly $2.7 million that we have to service as far as certificates of participation, our lease purchase. So that's roughly 27 cents of the 62 cents that we gotta have in there.
That's obligated.
Absolutely.
Might as well be in your debt first point.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, above that, you know, we've committed to a certain amount of projects that are going to occur this summer. 3.5 million, roughly, projects that are going to occur this summer. So, although we will have some fund balance, we need to make sure that we have enough fund balance. You know, can we reduce the 62 cents? Yes, we can. To what level? I'm not going to guess at that at this point, because you know, even though, I mean, you're right, we've spent a lot of money in capital projects over the last several years. However, you know, 2 years ago, when the district was putting Prop S up, there was a, you know, $150 million worth of needs and went for a $70 million bond issue. And that didn't pass. Prop P passed at $40 million. So that leaves, even if we addressed all $40 million with, you know, we've sold the bonds now, if we were able to address that today, we still got $110 million worth of issues that need to be funded. And I mean, frankly, in my opinion, $5 million a year towards projects, I mean, that'll take 22 years to do the $110 million worth of projects. And in 22 years, there's going to be far more than $110 million worth of needs. So I think the district has done a fair job in establishing a reasonable middle ground in addressing capital needs with what they can, while being able to maintain a fund balance that's, is it what you want? No, it's not what you want in operations. But it's been able to fund what we needed to fund to this point. There's going to come a point here shortly where even if you pulled everything but the 27 cents back, you're not going to be able to take care of the operations.
I understand, but you have the option of transferring some money in.
Yes.
I guess my point is that that's always a choice.
Yes.
It's a matter of choice. And it's like, we have been absolutely fighting over the fact that we got our fund balance has been really, really low, when in fact we have an option to improve that. And the option is to sometimes trade off a little bit more here than there to get that back up there.
We have multiple options, and we will talk about those this evening to improve that fund balance. Absolutely.
Can I ask a quick question on this page you just went over here?
Sure.
You said that, I'm just making sure I have this right. The total of all funds is 132 million some odd dollars.
Yes.
And then your expenditure, your total of expenditures is 135. So
Yes.
we are already, based on this, in the hole by $3 million.
2.5, yes.
That's for next year. This is your draft for,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Now, you said it was 3.1 that we've allocated already for this summer's projects. So if I'm looking at
The
Which one?
3.5, a little over 3.5.
3.5, okay.
Yes.
Which one am I looking at that includes that?
So part of that would be, if you look in capital improve, on the page with the revenues expenditures by function, capital
Okay.
improvement of $4.2 million.
4.2, okay.
Yeah, so 3.5 would be what is allocated for those two projects, Fox Elementary and Seckman High School. And then there are other district-wide budgets that end up falling in that same category.
Okay, so,
So mainly it would be buildings and grounds for other things they need to do.
right, so that's at 4.2 then?
Yes.
Okay,
Correct.
all right. And then over on the other one, it's 6.5?
6.5.
And that includes the 3.5 or no?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes,
Okay.
and the difference, yeah, you look at that and you say, well, this capital improvement shows 6.5
Yeah.
and this one shows 4.2. Well, the
Right.
difference is how they're segregated. So this first page is by function. So you're talking about instructional, support services, community, capital improvement. Capital improvement is a huge category there that falls against all sorts of functions. The other one is expenditure by object, and there's a more specific object for capital improvement for like equipment and things that would normally fall up above an instructional and support services on the other page.
Okay,
So it's just a different category, categorization of those expenses.
okay.
And no one is better than the other?
It's just how it's how the codes are put together by DESE.
Okay.
So there's, yeah, our codes, if you ever want a tutorial in DESE codes,
Oh, no.
you can sit down with Dawn because she knows them inside and out, but I can give you a primer on them, and ours are about 19 or 20 characters long and maybe longer than that now. So, but each one has a certain reason for being there, and it's all got to do with our state reporting that now ends up rolling up to the feds with a lot of.
Sure.
So we're
Different
looking
projects.
at two sheets that are the same.
They're the same, they're just
Just-
sliced and diced differently.
Oh, yeah.
As far as the expenditure reporting. I mean, the revenues are exactly the same, because, yeah, they're allocated differently.
John, it's a pretty, it's a pretty standard accounting practice when you're building a budget to be very conservative on what your expectation is on revenues,
Yes,
and to be a little bit more liberal on what your expectation is on expenditures.
yes.
And that's why I've never seen a budget that wasn't in the red when it was initially put together.
Well, it wouldn't concern me so much if our reserve wasn't so low.
Well, thank you, that's my point.
Yep.
So,
I understand. And yeah, am I pleased with the state of this preliminary budget? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There are some things we can do to address that. Are we going to be able to have a budget by June 15th that is a balanced budget without adding ESSER funds in? No. No, we cannot. But depending on, we can shave that 2.5 million total deficit down by some amounts, and we'll get to the page here in a little bit. But depending on how we end up allocating these ESSER dollars, it could be a big change for how this looks.
Really, the wild card right now is how we use those ESSER funds.
Yes.
so John, so in order to pay for the 3.5 that we already spent for this budget, are we going to have to do the 0.62?
That's the assumptions that this budget is built on. Now, even with the 62 cents that it's based on with that allocation, So even if all we did, if we did the 62 and we just said, okay, let's just make it a break even, we would still be transferring $2.1 million from the operations to the capital projects.
That's what I wanted
To keep it at the exact same fund balance that it will wind up this year. And, this would not be a good idea. Let me preface what I'm about to say with this would not be a good idea. But you could limit your transfer so that your capital projects fund balance at the end of the year is virtually zero. That's a terrible idea. But it could be done, and that would be less money that you're transferring out of the operating funds. However, if you have a catastrophic failure in a building with an HVAC system or some other, all of a sudden you're scrambling because you have $0 in your capital projects fund. So that's not a good idea at all. So I would say as a minimum.
But can't you transfer more money in if you want?
We're limited. There are some scenarios where you could, but the 5 million
That's it.
calculation that DESI does, that's about it for our district on an annual basis. And that number fluctuates a little bit each year, but roughly 5 million would be it.
John, not on capital improvements, the ESSER funds don't fall into that calculation of transferring money for capital improvements, correct?
Correct.
So in other words, if we have capital improvements that align with what the ESSER fund says for climate control in the buildings, our heating and cooling projects that we already have scheduled, we could use ESSER funds to pay for those, correct?
Correct. Now, and if I can, if you would let me keep going through some of these, because I got lots of other information that may help clarify, and then we can go. So the next page, this page is blue and white, and I'm trying to summarize here for you the COVID related fundings that the district has either already received or has been allocated. Okay, so as you run down there, and each one, the initial, the number that you see for that particular grant that is in white, that is the statewide allocation for schools. The number in blue is the Fox C-6 allocation. We've got what the purpose, broad categories of what those expenses can be, what the obligation window is, and then what DESI's current status and our current status is. So the first one, ESSER 1, we received a little over $1 million. This, we were notified of this about a year ago. We allocated it to salaries due to lockdown last year when we sent everybody home, but we were still paying salaries. So we've allocated all those funds. So we've received those monies, most of them last year, the remainder of it this year. The next one, the Missouri Student Connectivity Connections Grant, which is part of ESSER 1 and GEAR 1, which is the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. We were allocated $72,000 specifically for student connectivity, and we have allocated and used those funds. Transportation supplement out of GEAR 1, $158,000 that is coming to Fox C-6. If you remember a couple meetings ago, we approved, the board approved purchasing 3 buses to help with our homeless transportation situation. So those funds are already designated and allocated to those 3 buses. And those buses would be part of what is in capital improvements on those other 2 pages that you see. So those funds will be expended. I'm going to skip ESSER 2 briefly, GEAR 2 briefly, and ESSER 3 briefly, and go down. You see the Jefferson County CARES Act funding there below all the ESSER and GEAR numbers. We've got $2.2 million. I'll be right back to it, Jim. I'll be right back. So the $2.2 million of Jefferson County CARES funding, we received that. Our deadline was December 31st of this past year, and we thought we were getting $1 million, and literally at the beginning of December found out we got 2. So we had to scramble to allocate to be able to use up all those. So you can see we use those on various, a lot of it was PPE, some salaries. That's what we were using for the Kelly subs and some of our COVID leave to fund those. So lots of things went in there. Now, back up to the ESSER II funds. The state was allocated $784 million. Our allocation is a little over $4 million. We have partially allocated some of those funds, and the remainder is to be determined, and that's what we're hoping to get some clarity on tonight. We have, to this point, allocated $445,510, and there's a page, it's the next to last page you have, that shows that and what those items were. So that leaves a little over $3.5 million, just under 3.6 that we need to allocate out of the ESSER II funds. I also have a couple pages down here, the allowed expenditures under ESSER II, and they're pretty broad. The Gear 2, $12 million for the state. We're still waiting information if and when that will be available to the districts. Oh, and one more thing about the ESSER II funds. We just received notice from DESE today that those funds are now available to be applied for. So in order for a district to apply and receive those funds, we have to submit a budget through DESE's EPEGS program. They have to approve that budget. Once it's approved, then, if we allocate it towards some allowable expenses that we've already incurred, we can upload that documentation, submit for a disbursement, and we'll get a disbursement within a month. Otherwise, going prospectively forward, we just gotta, whatever we decide that we're gonna spend those dollars on, we have to put that budget in the EPEG system and get DESE's approval.
What portion of that do you think will be ours?
Out of the ESSER II?
Out of the ESSER II, yeah, out of the ESSER.
Oh, so we're getting $4 million. We've been allocated in the blue there, $4,024,919. Okay. Yeah, Gear 2, I have no idea. It'd be a guess.
But not $12 million.
No, we will not. Yeah, looking at, it's going to be, I would say, less than 50,000, probably, that we'll receive out of that. Just judging by the Gear 1 number up there where we got the 72,000 allocated to us. So that will move us to ESSER 3, and this, as I shared earlier, the $8.9 million allocation, those allocations were just released last week, and so we will be receiving, and that's actually the next page is the actual allocation from DESE of $8.9 million. Initially, we have access to $5.9 million. The remaining will be available to us after the state application has been approved by the United States Department of Education. So we have to submit all of our stuff, the state will submit theirs, and if theirs gets approved, ours will get approved, and we'll get that extra $3 million available to us. So you can see we've got, $14.2 million through just ESSER and GEARS funds, plus the other $2.2 in Jefferson County CARES Act funding, for a total of $16.4 million available to this district. We have roughly, so the 8.9 plus, we're at a little under $13 million that we have not allocated yet, and it's basically ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. So the ways that we can use those funds, if you move 2 pages down, there's a little 2-page that looks like this, or 2 pages of that page and one more that are related, shows allowable activities, and then the page after that is for ESSER 3 allowable activities. So anything, we can use this for anything that is authorized by ESEA, IDEA, all those, Perkins, McKinney-Vento, all those. So if it's allowable under basically any federal program that's out there right now, it's pretty much allowable under ESSER. or ESSER 3. The big thing is, of course, coordinating preparedness for COVID-19, but you go down through all these, and specifically under ESSER 2, as you mentioned, Mr. Shalou, on page, at the bottom of that page, well, I mean, there's talk about the learning loss that can be addressed with ESSER 2 funds, and that's well and good. I will let the board know, ESSER 3, there's 20% has to be used for learning loss. So I know that, and we'll get to this page in a minute, but I know we've already allocated some ESSER 2 funds for things that could be considered learning loss. I would suggest that anything that we've allocated for that has to do with learning loss at this point, we need to put to ESSER 3, because we're going to have roughly $1.9 million of expenditures that to use in ESSER 3 dollars.
So the things like Canvas training, Canvas software, the 3 years of contractual agreements.
Yes.
All of that can be pulled from ESSER 2 and then ESSER 3.
Yes.
And then that money stays in the general fund.
Correct.
What about funds for hiring people to give students, especially at the elementary level, that have fallen behind significantly, more one-on-one attention during the coming school year?
So, addressing learning loss among students, including low-income students, children with disabilities, English language learners, including...
Well, what about just having lower class size, which right now we have, do we not, Dr. Gilman?
Yes.
So we're maintaining our teacher army, maintaining lower class size to address some of that learning loss also. So is some
If
of
it's
that being
addressing
used for
learning
some-
loss, then it would be an allowable. In ESSER 2, there's not much of a, so ESSER 2 is pretty much allowable for everything like we did with ESSER 1, so pretty much you could cover salaries with it. And that's the guidance we've received from DESE, because we were checking on that. ESSER 3, there's a little more of a caution on salaries, and they still haven't come out and said, yeah, although number 14 on this page that addresses ESSER 3, number 14 on that page talks about other activities that are necessary to maintain operational and continuity of services, including continuing to employ existing or hiring new school staff.
And one of the things I think we really need to consider, and I'm sure Dr. Frigo is going to have a lot of input on usage of ESSER 2 and 3 funds, is, you know, the saying, right? People over programs. In coming out of a pandemic, the more allocation we can do to get people on the ground floor to help with the learning loss is going to go a long way, especially with mental health. So in this is specific in ESSER 3, there's a line item, if I remember, that says including hiring of counselors.
That's number 11 on this list.
So
Yes.
something to keep in mind, as you guys were discussing, is how can you get lower class sizes? How can you get interventionists at elementary? Carol had brought up the idea of TAs at each building, you know, in the past. How can we do that, but be cautious that it's not a forever thing, you know,
Right.
it's to get us through the pandemic.
You got to be careful using one-time money
Right.
on a recurring expense.
Well, that's why keeping our teacher force where it's at and not, you know, and keeping classroom size smaller, that eliminates possibly the having to hire more staff because we have abundance of staff at the elementary level. Now, at the secondary level, our class size may be large and we may need to add teachers at the secondary level to help with learning loss there. But at the elementary level, for at least this year, having no new programs, but maintaining the teachers with a smaller class size should address learning loss.
Well, Judy, just one thing relative to research. I know this Reading Recovery is a program that has been used very successfully with kids that are really struggling with significant delays in their reading level. And I think if we miss the opportunity to grab those kids and literally do everything we can to get them up on level, and that's almost a one-on-one program with Reading Recovery. And I think Read 180,
Yeah,
same.
we just purchased Read 180 again, didn't we? Yeah, we just purchased.
No,
It was Read 180.
that was
or-
RAS.
No. I'm talking about for the secondary.
Oh, maybe.
There was some literacy program we just reinstated again that was removed before. Okay, it was something.
I wonder if you're talking about the specialized reading program that we can only have 6 to 8 kiddos in there. Wilson and Words, what's that called? Words My
Words
Way.
the Way.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know.
So those
I
are very
know
specific.
We got that, the reading aid, or the
Reading aid is
the RAS kids.
right?
Right, I knew
That was
about
K
that,
through
but
3.
there was another one, because I mentioned it about the ELA class, or the literacy classes at the middle school, that we had reinstated that program again.
It wasn't AR.
No, it wasn't AR. It was I thought it was something like Read 180 that was.
So we
Reading
do-
counts maybe, or it was something like that. I don't know. Maybe
We,
it's
we
back-
do have the
that's-
Words My Way and what's the other one called? I'm sorry.
Wilson.
Wilson, yeah. So those are specific reading programs for the lower level readers to try to get them, but it's very specific. Like you can't have more than 6 or 8 students in your classroom, and we don't offer many of those because we don't have, when you devote a staff member to 8 kiddos, it's difficult to do at the secondary
Well,
level.
I know, but we're at a point, I believe, where we're going to have to provide intensive care to students, because I believe there's going to be some students that are going to be really, really far behind. I hope I'm wrong, but I have a gut feeling we're going to be doing that. And every year they're behind, I don't think it's important to understand the value of kids doing well with reading, because that impacts every other subject area, believe it or not. That's one you got to get right. And if you don't get that right, and we need to invest as many resources in that as we possibly can, because if we don't, every year that those kids are behind, they get further behind. We're going to leave some of our kids behind, especially after this pandemic. So we really seriously need to look at, okay, who needs intensive care, and we need to have the programs in place when school starts to make sure those kids get intensive care. And even though you can bring the class down a couple of students, an average, that's not the kind of attention these kids need. They almost need one-on-one kind of attention.
Several years ago, Mr. Brazil carved out about $55,000 for the elementary buildings. And so basically that's about $5,000 per building, and we used that for tutoring intervention. So when we would have interventionists come in, they would pull kids, they would do phonemic awareness and that kind of stuff with them, sight words. That has been the best money that we have spent of that amount. Like, it is incredibly valuable. So kind of back to Dr. Patel's point, people. And I agree with Judy, like keeping those class sizes down is important. One of the tough things is it's a little uneven. So, like you might have a certain building in one where they have, super low class sizes in their kindergarten. But that's just not, it's just not even, because we have about 4 or 5 staff over. But if you took those people and they were interventionists, if you had overages, or if you could hire some interventionists, that would be fantastic.
But how would you do that if it's reoccurring? Would you only have them for the year?
Well, I do think, to Mr. Shalhoub's point, this is kind of a, it's a little bit of a crisis intervention situation. So I think trying to bridge that gap and bring them back to grade level would be the key in the next 2-3 years.
Didn't we, seems like we had a program at one time where we had hired some of our retired teachers to come back part-time to work in that particular, where they would work with a couple of kids.
No, yeah, we had, Merrimack was one of those buildings where I had Cindy Boyd and Anita Niebrigi, and they came in, and I had 4 of them, and it paid huge dividends
So
for
it
us.
works. It works.
Oh, it was amazing.
One-on-one works always.
It was amazing. They did one-on-ones, they did small groups, they even did some push-in groups with certain classes, and it was fantastic.
So ESSER 3 money could be applied for something like that, John?
Yes,
Okay.
that is my understanding.
And that 20% that we need to spend specifically for that.
For learning loss, yes.
For ESSER 2 money? Is that 20%?
No, that's-
Or is that
No,
ESSER 3?
that's just ESSER 3.
ESSER 3.
ESSER 2, you can address learning loss with those funds, but since we have to, out of ESSER 3, any expense that we've got that is learning loss, until we reach that 20% threshold, with ESSER 3. Should be paid for with ESSER 3 funds, not ESSER 2 funds. So you have the allowable expenses there for ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. The next sheet should look a little bit familiar. It's been updated with the allocations. So currently, and just to give you a little insight into my thinking on this, we started this out before we even knew about ESSER 3. So, because this is just the ESSER 2 funds, so we got the $4 million allocated. It's page 9, JP. The $4.9 million, or $4 million of ESSER 2 funds. You can see items like Ms. Smith was referring to earlier, Canvas, those kinds of things. My Perspective, World History and Government textbooks, totaling $445,510 that we've allocated out of that $4 million, leaving $3.5 million. I have listed below there other items that could be, they fall under the allowable uses for those ESSER funds and things that had been talked about in one circle or another. So those items total, of course, well more than the 3.5 that we have remaining. So you see the total request of 12.6, so that leaves us in the whole $9 million, which is eerily close to the amount that we're receiving in ESSER 3. So, and that's just an aside. So,
Those were the items that you had budgeted out over the next 4 years, correct? Those HVAC products.
Correct.
So what we're saying is that the opportunity to maybe accelerate those and move that forward may be available to us.
Right, and these are specifically for Seckman High School and Fox Elementary, which at this point are the two most critical as far as finishing up their HVAC and their roofing issues.
Were those, I'm trying to remember, you had the capital projects
Yes.
out for 5 years or something.
Right.
Does that include all of those?
Yes.
Okay, that's everything.
Yes.
So that would take real pressure off of the capital improvements budget for those subsequent years, I would think then.
Well, there's still...
I know there's other things that need to be done.
There's still
but
$100 million
but we can't do everything at one time.
Correct. But yeah, that would help address it for, and I put over there in the notes the year that it was listed in,
Right, okay, yes.
on that spreadsheet that you're referring to with all the capital projects. So yeah, that goes out from, this coming year out for 3 years.
24 it looks like.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So you're looking at the ESSER funds, ESSER 2 funds then, for what's going to happen this summer. Instead of taking it out of capital improvements, you're talking about possibly using them.
No.
No.
Well, actually we could, because...
Well, isn't that what the first one is? Seckman High School?
Oh, you know what? You are correct. I'm sorry. Yes. So the 1.6 and the 2.4 are what's going to occur this summer at, and actually it's not the whole 2.4 because we didn't do the whole Fox Elementary. But yes, is it a portion of those that's coming out this summer? So yeah, we could allocate.
So then the money would stay in the capital improvements until we...
It could stay in the capital improvements, or it could stay in the operating.
Okay.
And
My point is, we've got an opportunity here
Yes.
to solve a couple of problems.
yes, we do.
And if we don't take advantage of it, then we have really failed our community in my mind. And that is one on a reserve fund and one on taking care of a lot of the capital improvement stuff that we need.
Yes.
immediately.
Yes, so there, this is the laundry list. I know not included on this. We've got virtual programming for K through 8 that's going to need to occur, and just a ballpark on that is $750,000. I know there's a lot of needs in this. There's more needs than we have dollars, and that's the way the case always is. But we need to do this thoughtfully. The last page is, the board, and I think I shared this with you within a week or so after the last board meeting, because you had asked for potential cuts. And so I just listed out some broad areas and what they are in the preliminary budget, and then just a reduction percentage and what that amount then comes over to as dollars. So those, handful of items I have listed there is $21.9 million. And it's all either Fund 1 in the general fund operations, or it's Fund 4 capital projects. So 21.9 million, 20 of that is in operations, and 1.5 is in capital projects. So you see the various percentages. So if we do, as we did last year, the 5% reduction across the board on purchase services and materials and supplies that are not federally funded.
Did we not just keep the budgets where they were from last year?
No, we did not. Whenever we,
Well, I know we cut it 5. And so did the principals, have they already been told what to spend? Did we?
so we sent out the budget sheets, and the budgets go out with an amount that they are allocated. And so elementaries are allocated $50 per student, and this is for instructional uses on purchase services, materials and supplies.
Is that like the second thing on the list?
Materials and supplies, not federal, yes.
That's what that is. Okay, so did we go, when you sent them out, did we go back up?
We went back up to the full funding that had been there previously.
Okay, why didn't we just leave it minus the 5% since our classrooms are going to be smaller next year, like our classrooms were kind of small this year? So we've got to go back and take it back now.
That is, yep, that's one of the options. So as I said, whenever we put the budget requests out there, we just said this is historically what has been allocated for buildings and by student, and so that's what we sent out to allocate. They sent back their spreadsheets, and so this is where you come up with $20.3 million in those two items: purchase services and materials and supplies. So then if we're all supplies, yep, and that includes, that includes the library, that includes, the office of the principal, that includes all the instructional supplies.
So was that this past year's budget, when they had 5% cut, how did they do? Didn't we even talk about possibly going another 5 last year, but we didn't?
Well, so we did it in 2 phases in the current year. We reduced their budget by 5%. Budget reduction gone, it's out of the budget completely. I did a budget restriction for another 5%. So an identical amount, and it's almost the same amount as we have here. It's roughly $1 million, 5% is, of purchase services and materials. So I pulled another $1 million, and I didn't take it completely out of the budget. I put it in an account that nobody can use, but if they need it, and they can justify it, it can go back.
And so were there any problems?
No. However, I do want to give you, I want to let you know, as you're well aware, we had 40% of our students in on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And those are, 40% on 2 days, 40% on the other 2 days. And 20% of the time, we didn't have a student in. Very few. And so, a lot of supplies automatically would have gone down 20% because, you're out 1 day a week. Of course, the spending has gone up a little bit in the second semester because we've had more students in, especially in the fourth quarter.
Would they have been able to maintain that all year long?
That is an excellent question, because I don't know how restrictive they were on their own end from, okay, we're not going to do this class project where we've got to get together and do this because we've got a social distance. So I can't necessarily say. That's probably a better question for, for a building administrator level, or, maybe one of our assistant superintendents. But I do know that everything that they asked for in the budget for this year, we told them to ask what they needed for their building. And so this was, we gave them what they had, and if they had an ask over and above that, as far as equipment goes, we told them, we'll put it in there. If you need a piece of equipment, or if you need, whatever that may need to come out of Fund 4, put it in there. Doesn't mean it's going to stay there, but if you don't ask, you're not going to get it. for sure.
My assumption on supplies is that they should have some inventory left over from last year.
I would assume so, and I will also tell you that I know some administrators, and I don't want to make this sound bad, but they ask for more than they need, so that in lean times they have that stockpile.
Right.
And you have other administrators that are, nope, this is what we're doing and this is what we're buying, and there's no fat.
So,
But you're saying for supplies, we allow $50 per kid.
Well, that was elementary. So elementary is $50, middle school is $65, and high school is $79. And then library on top of that, libraries get $16 per student for that building.
Since we had the kids actually in the buildings about half the time, you would suspect that there should be some inventory left.
You would suspect. But also, well, yeah, I mean, it depends on the ordering. You know, if they didn't do their full bore ordering at the beginning of the year, like you would normally do for a regular school year, maybe you don't have that. I don't know.
Okay.
But, because we did tell them, you know, at the beginning of last year, hey, you know, you just lost 10% of your materials and supplies and your purchase service budget. So that's the way it is.
So you said you had that money that you've put aside in case they need it. How much is that?
So that would be roughly $1 million.
and you said they didn't use any of that?
Correct.
And
So
what
that's
is-
still sitting there?
Correct.
Okay, so how did the secondary schools and the elementary schools handle this? I mean, as a teacher, I just remember the only things we ever worried about were paper. Is there gonna be enough paper?
There was enough
And
paper.
art supplies. And the art teacher was always like, I didn't get any construction paper, I didn't get any glue, so, those were the only things I ever really heard about as a teacher.
So at the secondary level, one of my biggest concerns would be equipment for labs. So in the science rooms and things like that, there probably wasn't as many labs taking place as there normally would be. A lot of those are consumable things, which is paid for by these. Just because we had students in half the time, or when they were in, they weren't doing those, close-up labs where they were doing those things. So right away, another thing is through our fax classes, right? There's a lot of consumables there. And so when you don't have students in all the time, they're not cooking every day like they normally would in a cooking lab, or they're not sewing the things that they're sewing. Sewing machines aren't being fixed as often because they're not being used as often. So I think that the reduction last year was easy to maintain. I don't want to say easy, but it was easier to maintain because you had less the kids and less the use. But I think going forward, it might be difficult, especially when we're wanting to focus on how do we bring things back to as normal as possible for our kids. This to me is where the rubber meets the road for our teachers and kids. But I know we have to cut too, but that would be my concern.
I look at this list and I think of what impacts our kids directly, and as a mom of a kid that's in band, instructional equipment, instruments, what's that?
So the district purchases large instruments that are used, by multiple students, like a tuba, or maybe it's a larger, more expensive, I don't know, like an oboe or something that, you don't have a full oboe section or something like that. So that is the majority of what that is.
Okay. And how, like Seckman High School athletic equipment, and how was it decided on what school, or what was your thought process?
So as I said, I had some different conversations with folks. So, you get somebody that will call and say, hey, we need to buy this piece of equipment. And I'm like, well, was it in your budget? Well, no, it's not, because we just, but we need one. And it's like, well, it's not in your budget this year, you're not gonna get it. So if you want that piece of equipment, you need to put it in your budget for the next year. And so specifically, the Seckman High School equipment, I think they've got a gator or two that are like at the end of their life or something like that. So I said, put it in your budget. I said, I'm not going to guarantee, that doesn't mean you will get it, but if it's not in your budget, I can tell you won't get it. So, you have to, there's not just a magic pot of money, believe it or not, and this may be a little known secret, or I think it ought to be well known. There's not a magic pot of money that the CFO has control of that all of a sudden hey, I need this piece of equipment that I can go, oh, okay, great, here's the money for that. There's just not.
And to tell you the truth, Fund 4, I didn't realize that this stuff came out of that. I thought capital improvements were, I always looked at it as buildings and AC and all that kind of stuff. So this is really enlightening to me. So I
It's
see
more of a capital expenditures type of fund. So it does do the buildings and all that, but any piece of equipment that is over $1,000 and has a life of more than a year gets paid out of Fund 4.
except for computers.
That's
Right.
because if it's a computer that's over $1,000, yes.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
But,
They're not, yeah.
Chromebooks
They're-
are
yes, you're right.
less than $300.
Okay, so, and then buses, we just bought some buses, or, I don't know.
So as I mentioned, the 3 buses that are part of the transportation funds through ESSER, through GEAR money, but this is, that's 3. After we get those 3, we will have 130 buses, okay? We need to, a decent replacement cycle on a bus would be cycle it out every 10 years. And there are people who will tell you it ought to be sooner than that. But every 10 years would be reasonable. That's 13 buses a year. Buses are going almost $100,000 a piece. That's $1.3 million a year.
And you said you had budgeted how many for next year? Was it 9?
Initially 9. Yeah. That's why the reduction there was only 10%. So that'd be roughly 1 bus. So still 8. And these are just areas that I've, looked at. There's other equipment that, we could shave here and there.
I have a question about transportation.
Yes.
They keep talking about the government funding transportation. When they talk about they increase the transportation budget at the state capitol and things like that, what are they funding?
They are funding less than 30% of allowable costs. So if the district spends $1 million on allowable costs, which, fuel, repairs, those kind of things for allowable miles, we get $300,000 back from the state. In the state statutes regarding transportation, it's supposed to be funded at 75%. It's funded at less than 30 at this point. Now, they did increase it a little bit, but it's woefully underfunded and has been since before Jim was superintendent.
I do have one question, John. As the CFO, you're the one that keeps track of the money. It seems like when it comes to instructional decisions on instructional supplies and things, I would have a hard time in your role deciding whether this is something that somebody should have or it doesn't have. Do you consult with the people in those areas to talk about those kinds of things?
Absolutely.
Because that would be a value judgment I would be really uncomfortable with.
Absolutely. I'm not an educator per se, although I work in the industry. Yeah. So, I absolutely consult with the folks that are in the know.
I have another question about equipment and furniture and things. As these new buildings are being completed, does the $40 million include furnishing these new buildings? Or does the furnishing and the lab equipment and all of that come from our funds?
So I think that's a mixture. I think if we're talking science labs, I think that may be included because all the conversations that we've had with Ittner, they refer to the cost of a science classroom being so much more than a regular classroom. So equipment, but you've also got gas and water in that.
So there's food service equipment on here also.
Yes.
And so I think that was part of Prop P also.
For certain kitchens.
Okay, and
This-
so this is other kitchens.
This is other, yes.
So somebody's gonna get cut.
Well, if you decide to do that.
I know.
Yeah.
So that's,
Yes. And the reason that is such a specific number is because that was with consultation with the Director of Food
okay,
Service.
okay. So they think that's possible.
Not happy about it, but
Oh,
that
not
was,
happy about it,
you know,
okay.
that was the, that was,
Okay.
if I,
If I have to,
if I need to, this is what we can do.
okay.
So I'm looking at the Segment High School athletic equipment, not buying some gaiters, and we could save 40,000. And then the vehicles for maintenance and technology, if we just cut that and not do it this year, it'd save 350. I know you're proposing 50%, but I'm just thinking, do these really have an impact on our children? And they really don't. And
But this isn't,
Well-
we don't have to do that today, right? We don't,
Well, I do need I need some guidance, because in 2 weeks, there's gonna be a budget presented for this board to consider and hopefully adopt. By state law, the board has to adopt a budget by June 30th.
right.
So 2 weeks is the 15th. So and my hope is, after guidance received this evening, that I'll go back and we'll do some work and adjust what needs to be adjusted and bring forward a budget that this board is willing to pass in 2 weeks.
So
If it's not on the 15th, then there's going to have to be another meeting on or before the 30th.
Keeping in mind that you can amend the budget at any time during the school year, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. The board may, I can bring an amendment, and the board can approve or not approve that amendment at any time during the year.
So if we went with just the reduction that you've suggested, or the idea, on all of these, we would save almost $1.5 billion.
Correct.
And so what is it you exactly want us to say?
It's a good question, Judy.
So, how? Okay. So the preliminary budget sits here with a $2.5 million deficit overall. That's almost 6 in the operating funds. Is the board, I don't know that comfortable is the right word, but is it acceptable to the board to start with a budget in that shape? Knowing, and of course the budget that I bring in 2 weeks will have some ESSER funds included to some extent or another. But just looking at this document, this is just without any of those outside revenue influences. This is just the shape of our district on local dollars, state dollars, and our regular expenditures. So is the board acceptable to a number like that? Do they want to shave 1.4 million off of that? A larger number? A lower number? And we can make any of that work. And then I know I can budget ESSER funds any number of ways. I know I've got an idea how I would budget them, but as I said a few moments ago, I'm not an educator. And I'm sure folks that are, day-to-day educators would maybe have an issue with the way that I would budget those funds. So a little guidance from the board on, okay, are we going to look to, are we going to look at the list that we have and apply it towards, are we going to apply it towards reading specialists, interventionists, counselors, and the like, to some extent, and another amount we're going to apply towards some of these capital projects, or not. We've got to at some point, for us to be able to access these funds, we've got to have a pretty much concrete plan to put into the DESI EPEG system, and they approve it. And that one too can be amended. Not all the time, but until there's a deadline for amendments on those. But that's a little ways down the road. But we have to come up with a plan on how we're going to use these funds and how we're going to use them to make the best bang for the buck for this district, improve our students' education, you know, address these learning losses that we've suffered over the last year, and, you know, if we're able to adjust capital projects concerns that we have.
And ultimately also improve our financial standing.
Yes.
And that would be my thing, is that we want to solve the problems with our kids. We want to make sure that those kids are learning. But using these funds to improve our financial standing would be, if we didn't do that, we would be making a terrible mistake.
So John, can we look at just like our ESSER 2 money and make a decision on that? And then ESSER 3, we can have a conversation, maybe when Dr. Frigo gets here, and talk to him about.
We certainly can. I think I saw heads nodding, and not that I necessarily need a motion or anything, but if, you know, obviously we've got the 20% mandate for the ESSER 3 that addresses learning loss. So
Right.
anything we've already, you know, that the board's already approved that addresses learning loss, we just need to shove over to ESSER 3 and go forward with it there. Am I?
Right,
Okay.
right.
But yes, we can have some further, more detailed discussions on moving forward. There's, you know, there's not an imminent deadline looming on ESSER 2 or 3. We've got on ESSER 2 to obligate. We've still got another 2 years come September 30, and we got 3 years on the ESSER 3 funds. Not that we necessarily want to wait that long, because if we do allocate any of those capital project type things, as you all are aware, you know, I mean, there's a big process that goes into planning, designing, and then bidding and purchasing for those. And if we are going to use federal funds for that, it's a little bit more of a heightened experience.
Okay, so the 3.5, you could apply that towards, of ESSER 2 money, towards salaries, correct?
Absolutely.
And that would.
You already did that, didn't you?
No,
He has
no,
not.
no. That is.
So-
That is, I mean, literally, that's a possibility. And let me just say, if we say the 445 that's already allocated, not all that is learning loss, but if it were, and so that gives us, you know, so that 445 would go against ESSER 3, so that gives us ESSER 2, the full dollar amount, $4 million, 24,000. We could, I mean, realistically, we could allocate that to salaries this fiscal year.
Right, and then that.
Now, getting that, since the EPEG window just opened on that, getting that in and approved and then submitted for reimbursement this year probably is not going to happen, since today is June 1. However, we could get that done and have the funds before the end of the summer, but still allocate them to this year expenditure.
Is this for salaries that we have, that people are already hired now? So it would be a
Yes,
reoccurring thing that you would still have to pay for anyway?
Correct.
Yeah, well, this money would then go into operational, right?
Right.
Okay, the operational fund, okay.
Because you're taking federal revenue, you're taking the budget for whatever salaries, say, you know, $4 million of salaries, you're taking the local budget and you're putting that in the reserve, and you're putting the federal budget in that place.
Right.
And then that $4 million in reserve then could be used for other programs, materials, supplies, capital projects, all those types of things.
John, I'm looking at.
Well, that would be,
Oh, I'm sorry.
it would be, I'm sorry, Carol, it would be close. Because then, I mean, literally, if we're talking about this now, the expenditures would be expenditures that occurred in 2021 fiscal year. This revenue will not be received until 21-22. So, I mean, it would definitely balance next year, because the revenue would show up, but the expenditures were in the previous year.
And that's, you're not talking about any of ESSER 3, you're just talking about.
I'm just talking about the 4 million of ESSER 2, correct?
So, how does the board feel if we would move that money to salaries? Because then it would go into operation or to reserve money.
I'm curious as to what Tammy and Randy think, because they have a lot of information regarding the budget and salaries and stuff.
As I said before, I definitely favor people right now for intervention, because I think that's the way to go. I think we have some good structures in place to do that. Just having bodies to help us do it would be a big deal. Kind of going back to the instructional supplies, I mean, I don't think I talked to any of the principals that were happy about their instructional budgets being cut. One of the awesome things about our staff here at Fox is we are able to provide kids a really quality education, but we run pretty lean. It's also kind of a sad thing that we have to do that as much as we do. We had, math textbooks, we had paper, we had art supplies, we had all of those things. So we made it. We made it work last year for sure.
What didn't they have?
The thing I heard the most about was the science that we deferred.
That's coming back.
And that is coming back this year, correct. So, and it is paid for, correct. So that's definitely a positive thing. That's the one I heard the most about. But our teachers are incredibly resourceful, using online things and other ways to get the job done. So
So you're saying hire more people with that money, or pay what we have now?
if there's money to hire to where schools can have an interventionist, I mean, like I mentioned the $5,000 that we have, and we get a lot of bang for that $5,000, but it's $5,000. So that's sub pay per day, so it doesn't work out to a ton of days. But even that has been so super helpful. So having a person dedicated in each building to doing that would.
Do you have one per building now?
No.
No.
Well, we have a person, but they're limited to that $5,000, so they're not there full time. They might be there 2 days a week or 2 half days a week.
So what would it look like if you had it?
If you had it, that you would have that person come in, and they would basically have an intervention schedule where they could just go through pretty much every grade level and help kids, fill that gap.
So they're there full-time every day?
Mm-hmm.
That's, yeah.
Well, could be.
If you hire an interventionist,
Yeah.
yes.
But do we have that kind of money?
That's what this money is, this is what we could use that money for.
That's ESSER 4 money, and
So-
that's 20%, correct, John? ESSER 3 would be salaries.
Well, that could be allocated out of ESSER 3 for learning loss. I mean, it would be allowable under ESSER 2 as well.
Okay.
So would that be something identical at every one of the buildings at the elementary level then, if you did that? Would they?
Ideally, yes. And there's different ways you could do it. You could make that a TA. If we ended up and our enrollment doesn't come up, and we have a couple, teachers that extras, basically overage. They could be used for that as well. I think that would be your biggest bang for your buck, in my opinion.
Randy, I know we've done a lot of assessment at the end of the school year. I think every kid actually in elementary was assessed. I would assume that our principals have targeted those students that are really in trouble at this stage of the game. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
They know who needs help.
They know who needs help. The kids we're most worried about are those kids that were virtual, that were kind of unplugged, so to speak. You know what I mean?
And those kids did get some end of the year assessment too, did they not?
They did, if we could get them in.
If you could get them in.
Yeah.
Or if we couldn't get them in, we're going to be able to do it right when they get in.
Absolutely,
School year.
yes.
But I'll tell you, just thinking back to being a building principal and having this happen, it would literally be frightening to me that I know we have kids that may have lost a year or two of progress with literacy training and reading, knowing that they're going to move forward with those skills, it would be, it requires intensive care. Whatever it takes to get it done, we just need to get that done.
It does. It's interesting, you know, some of the data that we looked at, if kids were in touch, if they were engaged, the learning loss was minimal. But there were kids that were not in that circumstance, unfortunately.
You know, and that's the essential difference. Actually, I think some of those kids where their parents were really engaged actually ended up in better shape than they probably would have been in a normal school year.
Yeah, they did pretty well. Yep.
Yeah.
So what about secondary?
So at the secondary level, I really think interventionists in our areas of math and language arts would be key. I also think social workers, our counselors at the secondary level are going to be very needed in our buildings. We're going to be bringing back students at the secondary level, especially. We had a large number of our students were virtual, which is why we're seeing the large number of Fs that we saw, that is bringing about trying to develop Canvas and have ways for our students to recover those credits. So we have multiple kids that we're going to have to try to get on track. And with some of those, you know, if we're looking at our junior class, we have a year to get them caught up. And so to me, again, it's back to the people. It's back to, you know, who are the teachers that we can, the extra bodies we can get in these buildings to help with those students that, you know, we're going to focus on our juniors, and what are those kids that are so far behind in credit, we got to do something or they're not going to be walking across the stage this time next year.
And that's a big deal too. That's a big deal.
And we can't forget about the social emotional piece, right? And this is at all levels. I'm not shying away from that at the elementary, but you know, the high school kiddos and some of the things that they've lost, and you know, I think having those social workers in there, counselors, and teachers that can really focus on, okay, this day I have an AC lab, but this academic lab is solely based on these kids have to be caught up on 5 credits or whatever that looks like, right? So that I'm very intentional and focused on what these kids in front of me need. And you know, even if that's, if we're having to balance between we need this, what do? We focus on what do we do to put supports in place to get those juniors across our stage next year when they're seniors.
So at the elementary, Randy, you said it was $5,000. So what does that look like at the secondary level? Is it the juniors you need to focus on, or is it each of the buildings?
Well, the $5,000 is what we currently do.
Okay. It's still occurring every year.
Yes, thank goodness.
So it's extra duty pay. Well, at the secondary level, that's what it looks like. If a teacher wants to tutor in math, they can say, I'll tutor in math 2 days a week and I get paid $20 an hour to stay after, and kids can sign up for tutoring. So there was money set aside for that to happen, and that's great to have, but post-COVID, that's not even gonna
This situation we're in, Judy, goes far beyond what $5,000 could fix.
Well, that's what I'm asking. I mean,
So
is that...
how much would you need per school?
Well, I don't know. We did some math on TAs at one point, and for TAs for every building, Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, it was about $250,000 for a year for a TA per elementary. But John's sitting over there on like $8 million. So
Well,
that doesn't sound bad.
That's what I'm wondering. Can we financially pull that much money from ESSER funds to take care of a full-time person at each of our buildings for that purpose?
So $8.9 million plus $4 million, so we got 12.9 between ESSER 2 and 3. We've already allocated a portion of it. With the funding deadlines, obligation windows, ESSER 2 of September 30th, 2023, and ESSER 3 of September 30th, 2024. So that gives us 2 and 3 years. So at $250,000 a year for the next 2 to 3 years, absolutely. And again, and I know I mentioned this before, and I'm not trying to poo-poo anybody's idea, because I know these are needed things, but one-time money and a recurring expenditure don't match up.
Well, it wouldn't.
There's ways to handle that, and with a limited contract or whatever, with an understanding that this position is going to exist as long as these funds exist.
Oh, yeah.
Once these funds are gone, the position's gone.
And really, in my mind, we should be trying to target most of this money for this year. We don't want to take 3 years to get a kid caught up. We want to get it solved this coming school year. We want them to be on track after the school year, which means we won't need those funds. That would be the one-time expenditure this year. And there are people out there, and I know we've done this before, where we have maybe retired teachers come in and work with kids specifically. I know there was a program at one time I was strictly deeply involved. And from what I understand, it was very effective, especially at Merrimack Heights Elementary School.
The problem with that, though, when you bring in retired teachers, the expense is higher than if you use TAs.
Well, you want to bring in people that can get the job done.
I agree if the money's there to pay them, but I'm thinking with the TA, it would be less expensive. Another thing that I think Scott had brought up when we were talking about different improvements, and HVAC systems are something that everything is not going to be able to be paid for by Prop P.
Right.
So I think that was another thing that he had talked about allotting some of this money for, and that is almost a necessity too, am I right?
Yes, I mean, there's a big need for HVAC. I know we reported out earlier in the year on classrooms that, had the number of classrooms the district had and how many had fresh air or a window that could be opened coming in, and there's a definite need there, absolutely.
So what if we talk about the list that's on the TV and we move forward with deciding on some of these things for now, which could be changed later, and then when Dr. Frigo gets here, we talk about prioritizing the hiring of whether it's going to be TA or an interventionist or whatever, and we prioritize then how we want to spend that money. And so right now, for now, if we just, you were talking about the 20% over here on this one. Did we need to make that, we'd already talked about it and then everybody changed it all of a sudden.
Right, now, you guys gave me the guidance that, anything for learning loss that we've already, the board's already approved and we've allocated to ESSER 2, we're just gonna move that to ESSER 3. And I would say anything else that we, the board purchases or we purchase that we can allocate to ESSER 3
And that
for learning
could
loss.
eventually be some of these people we're talking about.
Yes.
But for now, we've already said that we're gonna go with learning loss that you've already spent towards that.
Correct.
Okay, so if we work on this, which could be amended later,
Absolutely.
and just go, even if we go with a slight deficit, to begin with, we can correct everything next month a little bit.
Right, so literally if you took this list at, $1.4 million, that takes 1.4 million off the 4.5 or almost 4.6 in the operating, because, I know a bunch of that's Fund 4, but that's just less that you have to transfer to cover that. So, you're down to a 3.4 operating deficit, and you're down to a 1.1 deficit overall, all funds, including, and that's before we put any proposed ESSER funds in there.
Okay, so we've already decided to go for the 20%.
Yeah.
You're okay with what's been said?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and so then we need to talk about this and decide whether, if we just go ahead and go with a slight deficit, and then we can work on ESSER money to figure out how we're gonna supplement that deficit next month. Is everybody okay with that? But we need to look at this right now. Is that what we need to do? Okay, so some of you have talked about different things, wanting a different percentage or to eliminate some things. I would kind of like to see, is the Seckman High School athletic equipment, is that only Gators or is that something else?
If you give me a moment, I can find the spreadsheet.
Because I think April and I had talked one day and it was about other equipment. And it was, you know, I think you said they didn't have any.
Yeah.
So, you know, what exactly are we talking about? Kitchen equipment, furniture and equipment and furniture district-wide. If everybody's okay with cutting this percentage for now, and just everything on here, it would be cutting almost 1.5 million if you go with this column, which is the reduction. If we go ahead and say we're going to do that, and then next month when we come back with deciding the ESSER money for the people that we feel like would be important to the buildings, and then the money that's left, maybe go back and pull the HVAC and some of this other stuff. Can everybody agree to do that? Okay, is there anything on here that people are absolutely disliking that want changed?
Really, Judy, in my mind, we hire these folks to make those decisions on what
He's
what the
asking us to
priorities are
approve
going
it.
to be. Well, those are folks that really should be.
Right, so they're asking us though, if we're good with this. Can he move forward doing this, just to prepare his budget for
So
next month?
if I bring a budget back in 2 weeks, Mr. Shalhoub, that is roughly the same minus $1.4 million of expenditure, so it's $1.4 million better in fund balances, would that be an acceptable budget for the 21-22 school year to start?
Yeah, absolutely.
So is everybody okay with this percentage for now?
Yes, because we can use the ESSER money for purchase services later on if we need to, or even materials and supplies.
If
If it has to do with student learning.
correct.
Yes.
If it meets the guidelines, absolutely.
Okay, so do we need to do we need to do anything else for
I
you?
think that guidance is
I have one more
perfect.
question. What about that $1 million you got stashed away?
I don't have, so
I know you
have-
don't. I
yeah.
know that was poorly worded. I
There
don't
was-
want to throw
it's-
you under the bus
It's
like
sitting in the bank.
that. I know. So, but can you use that for something, or were you holding it for a rainy day?
No, so literally, it just reduced the, well, it didn't reduce the budget, but the end effect.
Right.
If we don't touch that by the end of this year, that $1 million will roll into the reserves.
Okay.
Okay,
This
and it
end of
just
this year
increased.
being end of summer school.
Correct. And so in my estimate, there that you have the 7/121 beginning fund balance of $17.4 million, that million's already in that.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so
Good.
you're good.
I'm good.
Okay, and so it can always be changed. We can always work on it. Okay.
Yes.
I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Hang on. What do I need to do? Okay. I need a motion to re-enter closed session to finish agenda for the purpose of discussing personnel pursuant to 610.021 at this time.
Second.
And all in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed?